and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And tonight we are going to be discussing another thought experiment. And today we are going to be discussing Mary's Room. Now, Dave, do you want to take away what Mary's Room is about?
Yeah, it comes from Frank Jackson's 1982 paper, Epiphenomenal Qualia. Hang on, I've got it written here. Yeah, Epiphenomenal Qualia. And it's a philosophy of mind experiment and also to do with physicalism. It's an argument that shows physical facts or attempts to show that not all facts are physical facts. And let me call it up here.
So, I mean, just before we go into that, just explain quickly for anyone who's not aware what physicalism actually is.
Okay, physicalism is the idea that all facts about the universe are physical facts. There is nothing over and above the physical when it comes to the universe. So there's no supernatural, which, I tend to agree with. But it's also the idea that unless it's reducible to physical facts, then it's not a fact at all. Everything can be explained through scientific terms and things like that.
Right. Okay, fair.
I generally tend to agree with that mostly, but I don't think it's the only way to describe things.
Right.
I think, well, everything, like, take for example something like a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that can be explained solely in terms of the physical facts that go into it, how it, the physical properties, things like that. But when we talk about it, there's a kind of explanatory reductionism that can go on. So while it can be reduced to all these physical facts, we don't discuss it in terms of kinetic energy. We say it's windy, it's blowy, there's a lot of rain. We don't describe the physical facts of the rainfall. We describe it in terms of the phenomena.
That's fair. Would you say, though, that the phenomena are a short way of describing those physical facts?
Yes.
Right. Fair.
But the phenomena itself is a fact in and of its own right, so to speak.
Cool. So let's get on with this this thought experiment then, and see how it tries to disassemble thoughts on a purely physicalist world.
Okay, it kind of, in Frank Jackson's paper, he kind of puts it in two parts. There's actually two thought experiments in there. It usually starts with Fred's red thought experiment, which I will cover in a sec. And then it goes into Mary's room, but I think it sort of works the other way around slightly better. So I'm going to do it the other way around slightly better. I'm going to do it the other way around.
And it will be slightly better.
Yeah. Okay, so Mary's room thought experiment is this, and I've copied this straight from his thing. Mary is a brilliant scientist who is, for whatever reason, forced to investigate the world from a black and white room via a black and white television monitor. She specializes in the neurophysiology of vision and acquires all the physical information there is to obtain about what goes on when we see ripe tomatoes or the sky, or use terms like red, blue, and so on. She discovers, for example, just which wavelength combinations from the sky stimulate the retina, and how exactly this produces, via the central nervous system, the contraction of all the vocal cords and expulsion of air from the lungs that results in the uttering of the sentence, "The sky is blue." It can hardly be denied that it is, in principle, possible to obtain all of the physical information from a black and white television. Otherwise, the Open University would, of necessity, need to use color television. What will happen when Mary is released from her black and white room or is given a television monitor? Will she learn anything new or not.
So this is, she'll experience color for the first time. So she understands all the thing about the wavelengths and things like that. But if everything is black and white to her, she won't necessarily have learned the physical facts more, but she'll have an additional experience of actually seeing the color and things like that.
Yeah, so she'll know what it's like to experience red. She'll know the phenomenological aspect of red, which you cannot learn from merely from looking at the physical facts.
And would some argue that the experience is a physical experience in itself?
Well, it is. It comes from within physical, but it's a phenomenological experience, isn't it? It's rooted in the physical world, obviously, but it's not necessarily what we mean when we say physical facts.
It adds an additional layer to it, doesn't it? It's so it's basically our mind adds an additional layer of processing that may not be completely tied to these physical facts.
Yeah. If we think about Thomas Nagel's argument, what it's like to be a bat, um, we can learn everything, all the physical facts about a bat, all of its physiology, all of its biology, and everything like that. But could we ever truly know what it's like to be a bat, what it feels like to be a bat?
No, no. Again, that's back to the actual experience of it. I mean, you could even go. Uh, it's I can't ever know what it's like to be you. Really, there's certain things that we could experience and have the same experience, but even then, we don't know if we're actually interpreting it in the exact same way. If I was to pick up this glass and have a drink, I like the flavor, but you might not. So you're having a different experience of the exact same thing to me.
Yeah, and would the neurophysiology be different between us that creates that different experience, or would it be the same? Like our brains are mostly the same, so when we see something, but there are people who have the same neurophysiology that might see red slightly different for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I suppose ultimately we don't really know if everybody does actually see things like color in the exact same way, because we can't really put our our brains into attached to someone else's eyes. So yeah, we don't even know if our individual experience of things that we all agree on, like red is red, and for a non-colorblind person, obviously. But yeah, yeah, interesting. So that would indicate that there is obviously something a little bit more. But would someone then make an argument that that's still physical stuff happening in your brain?
Yeah. Um, but again, okay, the idea behind this isn't that stuff isn't reducible to physical activity in the brain creating these experiences. Um, so the materialist view isn't really in danger because the materialist view argues that everything comes from the material, whereas the physicalist argues that the only facts about the universe are physical facts. Which is, I know it doesn't sound that much different, but there is a little bit of nuance there.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So
And the
we
best way I can put it is ontologically, everything is physical. Um, so your brain and your mind is ontologically physical. It is what creates the experience. But the experience itself isn't a physical thing. It's not something that we can put under the microscope. We can look at the actual things that go into it and create it, but that is solely a subjective experience.
Yeah, fair. That makes a lot of sense. I suppose you could even have something where, for example, if you were even examining someone, through some form of imaging, MRI or whatever, and you were stabbing at someone and seeing, the experience going on, and two exact people could even have the same sort of brain spikes in their head, but it could hurt one person a hell of a lot more than another.
Exactly.
Fair.
Um, it so the brain can be reduced to terms of function, but is function all there is when it comes to the actual experience? Like I think it's M fibers. I can't remember. But there's a particular fiber in the nervous system that creates the feeling of pain. So is pain just the firing of these particular fibers, or is there more to pain than just these firings?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I suppose there's the interpretation of it by the brain, and everyone might interpret it a bit differently. Some people might be more used to it as well. So, I mean, what does that say for someone who's got more used to a particular experience and therefore doesn't feel it as much?
Yeah, exactly. Um, but then there's the question of whether or not these experiences could be considered facts. So you have physical facts that are propositions. And this kind of goes back to if you think about what we were discussing about virtue ethics, where you can have all the theory, but not the knowledge how. So, riding a bike, I could give you all the propositional facts about riding a bike, but that doesn't necessarily equate to being able to ride a bike. Riding a bike is knowledge how. So, is knowledge how a fact or
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of it is one of yeah. It's complicated, isn't
it is?
it?
And that's what's known as the ability hypothesis, where
Mm,
um, Mary does actually learn something new, but it's not a fact that she learns. It's not knowledge of, it's knowledge how. So
mm,
she has knowledge of how to recall what it looks like to see that color. Imagine what it
yeah,
looks like to see that color. She
yeah.
gains a new ability rather than new facts.
I suppose it actually on the imagine point, it'd be really hard to imagine what a color actually looks like based on, oh yes, well the light comes in at this sort of frequency, and you're like, cool. What does that mean? I mean, you might know what it means on paper, but again, it's back to the experience. It's not until you realize that the live light doing that looks like that.
Well, yeah, if we go back to Thomas Nagel's argument about the bat, we know that a bat sees through sonar
mm.
and builds up its landscape through sonar. Um, but does knowing all those physical facts know what it's like to see using sonar?
No, no, not at all. I mean, again, that's some things just have to be experienced to actually have knowledge of them. Or yeah. So on that note, I mean, is that the key split between a physicalist and materialist sort of view?
Possibly. I mean, it can be. This sort of view can be described as something like property dualism. I know that that's kind of a dirty word in the skeptic community these days. Um, but property dualism is the idea that physical properties can have more than one property. So water is H2O, but it's also ice. It's still H2O, but it's a different property.
Right, fair. That makes sense. So yeah, obviously, water can be a liquid, a gas, and a solid. Um, so fair.
Yeah, they're still made up of these same things. There might be slightly different properties involved, physical properties, but we describe them at a sort of higher level. So the higher level properties can be reduced to the lower level properties,
Mm.
but when we describe them, we actually talk about them in terms of the higher level properties.
Yeah, we'd say ice, not water, with its molecules slowed down and making a static feature.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
exactly.
it would say steam rather than saying really, really, really active warm water.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's we don't discuss it in terms of the kinetic energy and things like that. Going back to what I said about the hurricane, when we talk about a hurricane, we don't talk about it in terms of that, like you just described the different properties of water, um, being, really highly active molecules or slow down molecules that kind of collect. We discuss it in terms of ice, or, I mean, these are still properties, they're still physical properties, but it's a fact that it's ice. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, fair. That makes a lot of sense. So,
Um,
so with this thought experiment, I think even there, it's already shown that there's more to it than purely physical. So where
yeah.
do you go from there?
Well, that's the idea is are these things facts, or are these things knowledge how, as was described by the ability hypothesis? Um, but it sort of relates to when you see discussions about in skeptic groups where people say, "Oh, the mind is an emergent property of the brain." What kind of property is it?
An emergent one, surely.
Yeah, yeah, but it doesn't really tell us anything beyond it coming from it. That's saying that the mind is ontologically physical, but it creates something else. But what is this other thing that it creates?
Yeah, that's true. And uh, this other thing that it creates, I suppose, why did it evolve as well? What was the purpose of it evolving in such a way as well? So there's so many questions about consciousness and things like that. I mean, to be honest, when I do look into things like consciousness and the self and all of that, it sends me a bit doolally, and I have to take a break from everything.
Yeah, same. Um, what you just described there is David Chalmers' hard problem of consciousness, and it
Ooh.
sort of relates to P zombies and that kind of thing. Zimbos, and I'm thinking we should cover that at some point, possibly even after this, if you fancy it.
Yeah.
Because the idea there is the physical facts. You could know all the physical facts about us, but do those physical facts of the brain actually tell you that there's an inner experience going on?
No. Uh, Equally, we could even say, is there an inner experience going on in anyone else, or is it just me?
Yeah, yeah, that's the problem with other minds. And possibly you could reduce that to solipsism as well.
Yeah. Let's not go there,
No.
though.
The syllogism that is basically brought about from Mary's room argument is the first premise is, if physicalism is true, then any person who knows all the physical facts about color vision knows all the facts about color vision. Premise two, it is not true that any person who knows all the physical facts about color vision knows all the facts about color vision. Color vision. The conclusion, therefore, is physicalism is not true.
Yeah, unless you're someone who caveats physicalism down to materialism.
But again, the ability hypothesis kind of shows us that that syllogism might not be correct, because is the ability to ride a bike the same as a propositional fact?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier when you said it. I mean, I would see knowledge how, in a way, as a form of a fact, because it's something that is true. Riding a bike is you get the facts about riding a bike, and then the experience almost backs up those facts. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's no such thing as really as a subjective fact, is there? But that's sort of what it is. I suppose it's the same like things like like taste. It might be a fact that I like the taste of burgers, and it might be a fact that someone else doesn't. But it's so that's the same thing with the experience of riding a bike. Once you've learned to do it, you've learned something that is definitely true uh, for yourself, but it's not necessarily something that you can give someone else. It's different to a standard fact, an objective fact, which is again the theory behind riding a bike and how all of the things work. So yeah, I suppose that's in my mind how I'd separate them. I don't know if that's the correct terminology or not, but that's sort of how I'd say it.
Yeah. I mean, you could say, I can ride a bike is sort of a proposition because it's a statement that's true or not. You can ride the bike, but your ability to ride a bike might not be a fact because it's not necessarily propositional, but it's still a fact that you can ride the bike. It's just the experience itself isn't a fact. So seeing red, it's a fact that you can see red or a fact that you have experienced red, but your actual experience isn't a fact as such. It's an experience.
Yeah, no, I'm down with that. Yeah, cool.
So physicalism might not necessarily be debunked by this because we can separate it out into two different types of things.
Martin's just popped in saying Brits can't ride bikes to save their lives. It's a lie. I'll have you know, everyone in London is very good at drunk riding a bike. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't live in a country where bikes are just left around free for us to ride around on,
Yeah, well, in London though, you do actually have the pay bikes, the Boris bikes as they're called, and
Oh, I
actually,
didn't know that.
yeah, and they've started popping up in places like Bournemouth and stuff like that. So there's basically they're locked in. You put your money in for whatever, and you take the bike and you just have a free ride. It's actually quite a good idea. Although cyclists around London with how busy the traffic is a nightmare, and perhaps they should do something like that a little bit. You want to race me, Martin? Do you? Feel free. You'll win. I am fat and have bad knees, but I'm up for it. All you need to do is buy yourself a plane ticket and get your ass over here. But yes, sorry, where were we?
Yeah, so the question kind of becomes, are there facts over and above physical facts? And personally, for me, I would say yes. I would say that they can be reduced to the physical properties, but they're not necessarily the physical properties themselves. Not in terms of explanatory power.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think that's why going on to a different topic, which I'll try not to segue too much into, that I feel that the mind itself is a sort of an X factor. It might be able to be reduced to what's going on physically within the brain, but I think there is a certain bit of uncertainty with it and what it processes and how it processes and what goes on. I mean, if it was, then surely everyone's experience of everything would be the same. And like you said with your thought experiment there, knowing the facts of color without seeing color, you'd know what that color looked like without having that experience. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think I agree with you there.
Well, if we look at it in terms of brain states and mental states, we can say that mental states are the same thing as brain states as such, in that they're created by the brain states. So you can't change the mental state without changing the brain state, and you can't change the brain state without changing the mental state. Do you see what I mean? So we can reduce the mental state to the brain state, but can you reduce the brain state to the mental state? So by looking at the mental state, you can see how the brain state might be through imaging or what have you. But if you looked at the brain state, just the physical facts of the brain state, could you reduce that to what that individual is feeling? You might be able to say he's in pain, but you couldn't say what that pain feels like.
No, no, definitely. At least not with current technology. Hey Opie, how you doing?
Hey, Opie.
Yeah, he's switched his account. Ooh, is this for your YouTube channel that you're going to be doing, bud?
Ooh, nice one. We should plug it.
We will do. I've said to him that as soon as he's ready, he can come on and have a chat with us to promote his channel. I think it'd be quite
Yeah.
interesting, actually.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
And he asks, have we gotten to Qualia yet?
Well,
Not
that's
exactly.
basically, yeah, it's basically what we're leading to now in that qualia is the experience itself. Frank Jackson describes himself as a qualia freak.
Nice.
Yeah. Um, so the qualia is the actual experience itself. What we're talking about, what it's like to see red is the qualia, the actual experience of seeing red.
Mm.
Um, So can the brain state tell us what that qualia is like?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely not with current technology or anything like that. I mean, could we one day in the future? I've seen enough sci-fi to be able to imagine that we could, but I generally don't know right now. Probably not. I mean, right now, probably not.
Yeah, yeah. But go back to Mary's room thing where she knows all the physical facts, knows everything, but can she know what it's like to see red without seeing red? Can
No, no,
she know what the qualia of red is like without experiencing the qualia?
no. I would definitely say no to that one. I'm sort of thinking in back to the sort of sci-fi thing. If there was some form of helmet that you could put on with receptors into my brain, then I would get their experience transmitted to me. But even
But that would
then,
be
I wouldn't know if I'm experiencing it the same way that they are. I'd be experiencing it my way via what they're experiencing. So even then,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, it would be your experience of their experience
yeah,
rather than their
exactly.
direct experience.
Yeah. So I don't know if we'd ever be able to get to a direct experience state. Um, but we could probably get closer than we are right now.
Yeah. And going back to Nagel's bat thing, if you could transfer the experience of a bat into you, it would still be the human experience of a bat experience.
Yes, because I'd be applying what I think about things, the way it feels to flap wings and fly when I'm a non-flying creature. Um, Even if I was to transport my consciousness into the bat as a passenger and to have this bat fly away and to be able to read its thoughts and everything like that, I'd still be having my experience of its experience. Interesting. Uh, Martin says, "Can she know everything about the color red?" So what we discussed at the beginning was all the facts about the color red, the wavelengths, etc. Um, but it's still not the same as the experience of seeing red. So, is there anything more to know about red than all the facts about red as well as the experience of red? I don't know. Is there any more?
Well, if we go into Fred's red now,
Ooh, okay.
this is the first thought experiment in Jackson's paper. And like I say, he puts this one first and then Mary's room, but I generally tend to go with Mary's room first because it sort of gets you in that headspace of thinking about it differently. So Fred's red is basically people vary considerably in their ability to discriminate colors. Suppose that in an experiment to catalog this variation, Fred is discovered. Fred has better color vision than anyone else on record. He makes every discrimination that anyone has ever made, And moreover, he makes one that we cannot even begin to make. Show him a batch of ripe tomatoes, and he sorts them into two roughly equal groups and does so with complete consistency. That is, if you blindfold him, shuffle the tomatoes up, and then remove the blindfold and ask him to sort them out again, he sorts them into exactly the same two groups. We ask Fred how he does it. He explains that all ripe tomatoes do not look the same color to him. And in fact, this is true of a great many objects that we classify together as red. He sees two colors where we see one. And he has, in consequence, developed for his own use two words, red 1 and red 2, to mark the difference. Perhaps he tells us that he has often tried to teach the difference between red 1 and red 2 to his friends, but has gotten nowhere, and has concluded that the rest of the world is red 1, red 2 colorblind. Or perhaps he has partial success with his children. It doesn't matter. In any case, he explains to us that it would be quite wrong to say that because red appears in both red 1 and red 2, that the two colors are shades of the one color. He only uses the common term red to fit more easily into our restricted use. To him, red 1 and red 2 are as different from each other and all the other colors as yellow is from blue. And his discriminatory behavior bears this out. He sorts red 1 from red 2 tomatoes with the greatest of ease in a wide variety of viewing circumstances. Moreover, an investigation of the physiological basis of Fred's exceptional ability reveals that Fred's optical system is able to separate two groups of wavelengths in the red spectrum as sharply as we are able to sort out yellow from blue.
That's interesting. I mean, they've actually going a little science. I wish I'd known that this one was coming up, but I didn't have enough time to prep today. But there are people who have extra cones in their eyes and actually see more colours than the rest of the people. And equally, there are people that have less or slightly damaged cones, and that's why you get different types of colourblind. So I mean, Fred in this example could actually be one of those people that has the extra cone, so he has a different experience of color, and maybe the tomatoes actually do have a slightly different wavelength, and it's not a different shade; it is a different color to him. Yeah, I see what you mean by having the conversation this way round as well. It almost doesn't make sense to have something like this, which seems as detailed as it does before, like the Mary's room.
The very vague Mary's room.
Yeah, I mean Mary's room's quite basic in comparison to this. So right, yeah, very interesting. So he's got a completely different experience of color, like anyone who has more cones in their eyes would have a different experience of color. Interesting.
Yeah, so does knowing all the physical facts about him having these extra cones or however it works, can that tell us how he sees that color red?
No, I mean all it tells us is that he experiences it differently. Although, flip side, the other way round, one of my friends is colorblind. In fact, a couple of them are, but this particular one, he showed me sort of like a color chart, and he showed me sort of like, this is what you see and this is what I see. I don't see any difference between these two charts, but you do. So by me having a higher ability in this particular area, just naturally, I could somewhat understand and have the experience of his experience, but not the other way around. So someone who can see more than I can, I will never be able to experience that unless they produce a set of goggles. Have you seen those that they have for colorblind people that actually corrects their vision and allows them to see color properly?
No.
No, so they actually do have that. But again, we still don't know if it's an accurate experience. It's their experience of what we experience. But there are these glasses that allow colorblind people to see color as those who are not colorblind. So maybe at some point in the future they'll create a set of glasses that allows us to see color the way people with extra cones in their eyes have.
Okay, and the question then becomes, will you learn a new fact about those people with the extra colors? So imagine if we could
I'll have a new
imagine
experience.
yeah, but you will also learn a new fact that this is how those colors look to them.
Yes.
Um, so one of the questions with the Fred's red thing is if you could somehow replicate Fred's optical nervous system into your own, when you finally saw those differences, would you learn a new fact about Fred, about the world? Or would it be, as the ability hypothesis states, that it would just be knowledge how, not knowledge of?
Again, this comes back to what we were saying about experience before. You know, I would regard that as if we were to say like a subjective fact about it, almost. Again, I know that's not the best term for it, but that's sort of how my mind wants to process
It's
it.
understandable.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's interesting. So I suppose that sort of backs up the point. There is more than just the physicalist sort of view.
Yeah. For me, I tend to go with everything can be reduced to physical facts, but not all facts are physical. Um, so what it feels like is a fact. It's not a fact that we can sort of put in terms of a proposition, but it's still a fact that something feels this particular way to an individual. Um, it's kind of a hard distinction. There are those that argue that phenomenological things aren't facts, they're just experiences. But for me, it's still a fact that it feels this particular way.
Yeah, yeah. Again, that leans into what I said about it being a subjective fact.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, yeah, that's sort of how I feel about it. Opie says colorblind people can see contrasts better than us. They were used in Vietnam to find camouflaged enemy. One could say that we are contrast blind. That's an
Yeah.
interesting perspective, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, fair play. Um, Again, you know, we don't have their experience of color. So like I was saying, even though my friend who was colorblind that showed me this chart, and he goes like, these two look the same to me, but I know they look different to you. um I still don't see his experience, so he might have had a very clear sort of line between this gradient, whereas to me it would have probably been a lot smoother. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, here's another one to sort of complicate it that little bit more.
That's
Just
what we
because I
like.
like doing, yeah, just because I like doing these kind of things. If we look at the brain in terms of function, so feeling pain is a function. Um, the experience itself is a function. Now, if you think about a clock has a function, doesn't it? Rad, um, but it can be expressed in multiple different ways. It's um, multiple realizations, basically. You can have a digital clock, you can have a grandfather clock, all of these different kind of things. Now you can reduce that clock down to its physical parts, what makes the digital watch face glow, tick, computer chips or say dials and levers. But that doesn't it tells us how the clock works, but it doesn't tell us what the clock does.
No, that's true. And I suppose someone who had never experienced a clock, say we were to bring a caveman out of time, would look at it and go, well, they'd probably just go, "Huh," and smash it. But the equivalent of what the fuck is this? Um...
Yeah. So it's the same with the brain kind of thing.
mm,
There are multiple mental states, and we discuss a clock in terms of its function. The same with consider a plane. There are multiple types of planes, and you can reduce them down to jet engines, props, all these kind of things. But when we discuss a plane, we don't discuss it in terms of the props or the jet engines, or we discuss it in terms of its function.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So you as you were saying, there's so many different types of flame. There's plane, even there's the common things about it, the flying, etc. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. So, all right, I am definitely convinced that there is more than the physicalist view. Um, what does that mean?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a fact that the plane flies, isn't it? And we
Yeah.
can reduce that to the physical thing and all the physical properties, but the physical properties aren't the fact that the plane flies. Um, they go into making the plane fly, but they're not the fact that the plane flies. The fact that the plane flies is a phenomenological thing.
So if we bring this back to, I was trying to segue around it earlier, but I just have to ask now. If we were to take the physicalist view, that would be the whole hard determinism sort of thing. Um, so would we say that with a materialistic view, there is a little bit more room for at least some form of free will?
I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Hmm.
The materialist view of the mind would be something that's epiphenomenal. So these extra properties of experience come along with the physical things.
Right.
Like you often get people who say things like, well, material can't produce consciousness because consciousness is something else. Well, I kind of disagree with that. I think that though there are phenomenological facts and we experience the world phenomenologically, I shouldn't be saying this word that much. I'm bad at it.
Every time you say it, I just want to go do 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 do.
I, um, but I think all these things come along from the material to produce, like the function of the clock is produced by the material elements. It's just that the clock isn't the material elements in and of itself.
Okay, interesting. So, I mean, you mentioned there the materialistic view was epiphenomenological.
Yeah.
So, what view would give the mind a phenomenological sort of thing?
Well, generally, I mean, you could look at it in terms of either substance dualism, where the mind is a separate substance to the physical substance of the body, something like Descartes put forward. But I'm not that kind of dualist. I think that's nonsense. Um, but if you think of it in terms of property dualism, where the physical property is ontologically what it is, but over and above that, there is another property, which is the phenomenological property.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, it's just one of those things because I don't think we're ever going to get an answer on this, at least in my lifetime. But I do think that we actively reflect on our experiences and knowledge, and we put things into practice based on our what we're thinking about, and it's not purely just cause and effect, etc. But it sounds like a purely materialist and physicalist sort of take on things would be more deterministic than the way I feel about things.
Well, the problem there is if you're going to argue that, um, then you would have to explain how the mental properties can affect the physical properties. Um, so, like, if you if you're on a bus and it's coming to your bus stop, and you get up and ring the bell and stand up and go to the front, is it the physical properties that have created the mental properties that get you to do that, or does your experience of the world create the mental property, which then creates the brain state? which alters everything and then creates the new brain state. How does the mental state interact with the physical state, the brain state?
Yeah.
Rather than just come along with the brain state.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Something I need to think on more, really, than anything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, the physicalist view is basically all cause and effects are physical cause and effects. Therefore, the mental is the effect of a physical cause rather than the cause itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I still think that the mind has some form of, as I said earlier, sort of like a bit of an X factor to it. So there can be plenty of causes that, you know, all of your experience, all of your knowledge, and all of that, and perhaps you can pinpoint someone's predicted mental state with some form of accuracy, but I still think that there's something in there that is unknown. Now, I don't know if that unknown property is something that we just don't know enough about, and actually you could predict absolutely everything, and then, you know what, hard determinism definitely is true. But I feel that there is something in us that is a little bit more than the pure physical, that we do reflect on things, that we can do things that are, even though all of these experiences and so we end up doing this thing instead of that thing. So
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I generally tend to go along with the compatibilist view, as you know. I'm not sure I could entirely explain how it works, but that's sort of the intuition that I get. But my intuition could be wrong, obviously.
yeah, I mean, I think I do lean that way, but it's one of those conversations, the whole free will thing, that I think about it so much that I basically go and implode.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a bit different to. Do you know what? I just completely lost my train of thought. See, there you go. I mean, could we have predicted that would happen? We could have, because
We could have tramadol and alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. But what if it didn't happen? We'd have just been really lucky.
In some possible world somewhere.
So Alan says the clock is an instrument for measuring time, but not time itself. The mind is the product of the brain, but not the brain itself.
Yeah, that's pretty much, it's caused by the brain, but it's not the brain.
Yeah, it's slightly different.
Yeah. Hence why the brain states can be, the mental state can be reduced to the brain state, but the brain state can't necessarily be reduced to the mental state.
Yeah, it's intriguing. Oh, okay. He's just posted a really, really, really long comment in the chat.
Oh.
I will try and read it out. He says free will or determinism. He holds a compatibilist view. So like you, Dave, and sort of where I lean. He believes that we have free choice in a predetermined setting, and our free choices become fewer and more predetermined as life goes on. We speak of free will as a property rather than simply a way of talking about making choices. Because it is a property assigned to certain motivations in decision making, not in decision making in and of itself. The use of the use of the phrase free will seems to be an attempt to communicate that we experienced a decision or decisions as made internally and not from outside pressures, influences, or circumstances beyond our control. The decision or decisions may have still in actuality been made from outside pressures, influences, or circumstances, but this is not how one experienced such decisions. This seems to be the point of bringing up free will. There are certain predetermined settings for each of us which limits free will, such as What geographical setting are we born into? What is the cultural background of that society? What is the predominant religion of what we are born? What year were we born? What time of year were we born? What was the societal status, economic status that we were born in? Do we have siblings? Do we have loving, encouraging parents, etc.? These things limit our free will, so our will is already limited and constrained by determined factors beyond our will or ability to choose. These questions only deal with our initial setting and circumstances. Then you have things that happen to us beyond our control: injury, sickness, captivity, torture, etc. These things are not determined by our free will, but this does not mean they were predetermined either. These things are neither predetermined nor free will, simply what occurred. I think we have really. What? Hang on. I think we have really is not. That bit doesn't make sense, but free choice. Oh, okay. So you're saying I think what we have is not really free will, but is free choice. We can choose A or B, Y or Z, but you will end up basically at the same place. I use the examples of choose your own adventure books or Telltale video games. You can make whatever choices you want to, but no matter what seemingly free choices you'll make, you'll ultimately end up in the same place. That's kind of like that Black Mirror Bandersnatch thing I think you're getting to there. Then our free choice is also telescoping throughout our lives. Every choice we make excludes everything we did not choose. So your possible choices are continually being more and more limited. The variety of possibilities you have to choose from become fewer and fewer as life progresses. If I marry someone, that choice has eliminated the possibility of marrying someone else. Although, mate, you could get a divorce. I've lost my place. If I marry someone, yeah. If I freely choose to drop out of law school, I have excluded my choice of becoming a lawyer, etc. So my free will is limited not only by circumstances I was thrown into at birth, but also is limited further and further with each choice made through exercising my limited free will. So the longer you live, the fewer choices you have to choose from and the less possibilities there are to exercise your free will over. Psychologists also have found after we make the same choice in a certain situation or circumstances a few times, we will continue to make the same or similar choices in regards to that certain situation or circumstance. I suppose that's induction. From then on subconsciously. This ultimately means most of the decisions we think we are consciously making are actually decided subconsciously prior to our conscious decision. This also has a telescopic effect through repetition. So your life, more and more of your through your life, more and more of your decisions are being made subconsciously. If this is the case, then most of our decision making is not a product of conscious free will, but seems to indicate most decisions we make are predetermined subconsciously. So there is no actual free will, only free choice, but our choices become fewer and fewer throughout life. So if you live to be an old man or woman, your life will seem totally predetermined, which in a way is true, but still influenced by our choices. Maybe, on the other hand, it could simply be I simply had to say this about free will and I didn't have a choice in the matter. Yeah, potentially.
That's basically how I look at it, to be honest.
Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense. I think that the more of a blank template you are, the less causal factors there are, so that the freer your choice will be.
Yeah. And hence why I lean towards compatibilism. It's not that we have this kind of libertarian free will where we can just choose whatever we want whenever we want.
Yeah.
There are, there are lots of factors that go into our choice, And as long as our choice isn't being bound by somebody else, we have a kind of free choice.
Yeah. No,
Even if it is our lower processing that determines it.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. I'll see you later, Opie.
See you later, Opie.
Have
Thanks for
yourself a
joining
good
us
one.
again.
Thank you for joining us. So Martin says, suppose I choose to deviate from my past choices, though, like be really random. I mean, you could. The whole thing with the libertarian free will is that there is no causal factors in that. So even though you've had this experience that all say that this is the best choice of action, you always just choose something random. That's a really bastardized version of it, but that's basically it, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. You could, yeah, I suppose you could do that, but equally, what caused you to deviate from your past choices? There's got to be something in there that you thought, well, hang on, this is a slightly different experience, so maybe this time I'll give this a go, even though it hasn't worked in the past. Maybe it will this time. There's got to be some sort of thing, but if you're saying to be completely random every single time with every single choice, that leans into that libertarian free will. And no worries, Alan. I apologize for fumbling there. It's really hard to read text when you're on a lot of painkillers. But yeah, cool. I'm sorry for deviating into free will. It's just the whole physicalist nature seems to sort of go on to that sort of deterministic nature, which there is part of me that just goes, no, there's something slightly more than hard determinism. So it's whenever we're having a conversation along these lines, my mind instantly jumps to that whole free will juncture.
No, it's all good. It's an interesting discussion. And again, if there are facts over and above, or the mind works in a way that isn't entirely physical as such. I mean, it's possible. Um, so like I say, I lean towards compatibilism. I lean towards a similar idea that Alan mentioned.
Robert's come in with a question. Hi, Robert, by the way. Thank you for tuning in. Wouldn't the libertarian free will concept conflict with a theist who affirms causation as an argument for God as the first cause?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to lean into that, not completely. Because the whole point of the libertarian free will would be now, not necessarily the first cause. So all of these things happened to bring the world as it is and make us as we are, but then they'd say you're completely free at that point to do whatever you want. So I don't think libertarian free will is in conflict with theism. In fact, I think it is generally where most theists would actually sit, because they believe God has given you complete free will. But it depends on who you talk to, because there are so many different concepts of free will, and they might not necessarily understand what you meant by libertarian free will. And as Martin says, libertarians are an affront to God.
I mean, even among theists, there is discussion about exactly what libertarian free will is, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, does God have libertarian free will?
Not according to the actual arguments where God can only do what is in his nature.
Yeah, interesting,
So
isn't it?
God couldn't choose to do evil, so therefore God cannot have libertarian free will.
Yeah. There's also the argument that God actually has no free will because he's omniscient, therefore he knows everything he is going to do. I know there's different definitions of omniscience, but if we go with the absolute sort of view, if he is absolutely omniscient. He knows everything he's going to do, and he couldn't choose to do anything different because that is what he would choose to do. So therefore, everything he ever does is completely fated. So he has no free will whatsoever because he couldn't do anything different, which means he's not omnipotent. Oh no, we're back into the whole omni God is incongruent and inconsistent, and it just does not make any logical sense.
Atheist.
So yeah, I hope that answers your question, or maybe it needs to ask more. So was there any more to the thought experiments, or have I taken us so far off track we're never going to get back on it?
We're never going to get back on it. But that's pretty much mostly what I had to say. I mean, we could go deeper and deeper into it, but this is really just a quick discussion about Mary's room thought experiment and the kind of implications it can hold, and looking at the mind in a slightly different way.
Yeah, interesting. Martin brings up the free will of AI. I actually had a conversation on that the other day of, and the truth is, I'm gonna phone a friend. Because it's an interesting one. Because obviously you program the base code, but then the AI makes far more decisions that are not purely based on the original code that you gave it. So in some respects, it is a form of intelligence like humans. However, is it still just making all of its decisions based on that? I think if we could get a true AI, then it would have the exact same amount of free will a human would. So, if you're someone who believes in hard determinism, then on both accounts, no. But if you're someone who is a compatibilist, then I reckon that it's the same for both. I reckon that the AI, if it's a true AI, the whole point is it's got as much going on in its mind as we do. But that's the best answer I can give you. However, I do have a friend who spends a lot of time looking into things like AI. And if you want, we can have a sci-fi show or even a fresh air podcast at some point and bring him on to discuss all these things. Wouldn't the AI be able to do more than a human? Potentially, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean free will in that regard. Okay, yes, an AI could build itself a sort of plane and fly off, whereas and be the conscious pilot of the plane, whereas we have to build a plane and get someone to fly it for us. So it's a different experience, but I don't think that necessarily impacts the free will in the same way. It's just the execution of the free will would be slightly different in that regard.
Okay, here's a question for you. Would it have qualia?
If it's a proper artificial intelligence, I'd say yes.
Would it have an inner experience where it knows what it feels like to be moved by Beethoven?
It could do. Depends on the sci-fi you're watching.
Westworld.
Then definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, just to bring it back to our discussion tonight,
Yeah.
I was thinking another one about sort of Mary's room, a similar kind of thing. Imagine if a deaf person learned all the physical facts about what it was about how hearing works. Would that tell them how it feels to listen to Beethoven? Would they know what it
No.
would be like to hear?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, you even see like the deaf people who experience sound through the vibrations, and they learn to dance to how the sound feels rather than how it sounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, very interesting. Now this is a topic that's actually really, really interesting. I hope we get some after we posted it, some questions and things like that as well. Yeah, really interesting.
I mean, like I say, I could expand on all this. I could create a presentation like we do for, like you were doing for the theism, atheism, and stuff. We could always do a presentation similar to that.
No, that'd be really good. I actually do have one little bonus that I would like to give everyone, but I need to quickly nip to the loo because I can't hold it any longer.
We'll get out there.
Yeah, so can you keep people entertained? Tell them a little story, and I'll be back. I do apologise for doing this live on stream, but I can't hold it anymore.
He's a pisshead. A dooby dooby doo dooby dooby doo doo. I don't actually have access to the chat, so hang on a minute. I'll go and have a look. Oh, I see. Martine's on Twitch. Hello, I can see the Twitch chat now. Yeah, so if anyone wants me to go deeper into this, just let me know. I'm thinking for the next one, possibly go into Chalmers P Zombies argument and Daniel Dennett Zimbo's argument, if anybody fancies that. It'd be another thought experiment, but again, another quick discussion on consciousness and stuff like that. Ooh, yeah, baby. Deeper, deeper. But yeah, the philosophy of mind is an interesting thing. And as far as I know, Joe wants to do one on morality at some point. He's got all slides and everything made up, so...
Sorry about that. Dearie me. So I apologise for doing that. I haven't done it before, at least when we've been streaming.
Get a bottle.
Well, you see, when we're doing the podcasts, sometimes that happens. But there's no cameras going on there. So I was just there like, yes, I'm listening to you.
I'm all right. I lie on the bed. The bog's like right there, so...
So Robert says he's missed the whole discussion. What was the conclusion? Would she have learned a new fact? So that was going back to our saying the experience. It's sort of like a subjective fact. That's the way my mind processes it. But you said it a little bit more eloquently than me, didn't you, Dave?
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I think that new facts are learned in that it's what things feel like is a fact. It's just not an expressible fact in terms of a proposition as such.
Fair. Alan says he can't wait for the morality show, and we've been talking about it for the last couple of days about that. Yeah, we were having a conversation. So I posted an article about morality, agency, and intent, and the effect that not having free will would have on morality, which was a follow-up to my article on does morality have a purpose. Basically, I've done a lot of looking into morality through different lenses, and a lot of discussions with Dave on this matter. So we are going to have a show which I think it was last year I started creating these morality cards. It was suggested by Josh that we have like quick, simple things. So I started creating them. I did them in PowerPoint as, they were just going to be little memes when someone makes a statement about morality, I could say, well, I mean, this is the answer. I mean, on Twitter, you're limited by so many characters that it's just nice to be able to go, well, there's your answer. It's part of the reason why we do a lot of the articles that we do and the videos we do as well, because so many philosophical concepts are far too in depth and to be had on places, especially like Twitter with the character limit. And it basically is going to be a review of the slides to see if that we need to change any of them, and to have any of the make any changes, and to address any objections that we have to it. Now, Alan, I meant to contact you on Facebook, but seeing as you're watching right now, I'll ask you if you would like to join us for that particular episode where I take people through the PowerPoint. You're more than welcome to join us live on air. You're obviously available at the times that we stream, which is an added bonus. So if you want to join us, feel free. If not, I understand. No worries. So yeah. And he also says the articles are nice and easy reads, and they're very well spoken, and he appreciates them greatly. Well, thank you very much. That's very high praise.
Yeah, he's definitely not talking about mine.
Well, yeah, you're a bit more educated than me, Dave. So you know, you use longer words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite often ask you what you mean by certain bits, but that's great as well. I think that's in some respects nice to have that sort of variety, because I always find myself learning new bits from your articles. Also, when you've sent me bits of your coursework that you've done.
I'm not supposed to do that.
Not that you've ever done that. When you mentioned ideas that you might have had
and written down and handed in as assignment.
Yeah.
I'm sure nobody knows. It's not like you're with the OU, so.
Well, Dave.
No, but everybody should do a degree with the OU. They're awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really, really tempting. If I had the time and the money, I definitely would love to do something. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people as well. I mean, one of the neighbours just over there, she's been doing one on childcare and all that sort of thing, and she's absolutely fantastic. Everybody's loving the course; they're learning so much, and it's almost a better way of learning. And she's not necessarily someone that I would have thought of as technically minded. I'd have thought the OU was more for people who are happier behind a computer, but that's obviously a wrong interpretation from me, because she's definitely more of that out there sort of person. But it's great that so many people can learn so much stuff just from doing like an OU course. And I think that might be the way a lot of unis will go in the future anyway, especially with things like the pandemic that's currently going on.
Yeah, lots of them are moving to online classes. I to be honest, I prefer it. Because I don't particularly like people, you know. But it's much easier because I can fit it around everything else and stuff like that. But I loved it so much. I've done an undergrad in philosophy, a master's in philosophy, and I'm about to start my computer degree.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? And eventually you're going to come back and get your doctorate in philosophy as well, aren't you?
Hopefully. Probably not through the OU, obviously. Because with something like that, you need more of a physical location, access to libraries, stuff like that. But I mean, that's a few years away. I still got quite a lot to learn before I can do a doctorate.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the last thing I had to bring up tonight is one that I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do, because I mentioned I've had tramadol today, and it does send my brain a little bit bad about. But it's the tale of the black and white night, which seemed to be somewhat relevant because we were talking about a black and white room. Have I told you the tale of the black and white night, Dave?
No, and I'm kind of getting worried now.
Well, if you don't hate me now, you will in a minute. In a black and white universe, there's a black and white galaxy, and in the black and white galaxy, there's a black and white world, and on the black and white world, there's a black and white land, and in the black and white land, there's a black and white county, and in the black and white county is a black and white kingdom, and in the black and white kingdom, there's a black and white castle. Inside the black and white castle, there is a black and white king and a black and white princess. Also, in the black and white land, there's a black and white knight with a black and white horse. And the black and white knight loved the black and white princess and wanted the black and white princess's hand in black and white marriage. So one day, the black and white knight worked up the black and white courage to ask the black and white king's hand, or the black and white king for his black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage. So, the black and white knight gets on his black and white horse, and he travels across the black and white land. He goes over the black and white drawbridge, gets off his black and white horse, goes into the black and white castle, to the black and white hall, where he sees the black and white king, and says, "Sire!" "Yes, black and white knight?" "I love your beautiful black and white daughter. Please may I have your beautiful black and white daughter's hand in beautiful black and white marriage." So the black and white king thinks about it for a minute. "Well, black and white knight, I have heard of your black and white deeds in the black and white land, but I am not sure if you are worthy of my black and white daughter. So I have a task of thee if thou will accept it." "Sire," said the black and white knight, "I will do anything you ask, for your black and white daughter is the most beautiful in this black and white land." "Very good, black and white knight, very good. You must travel across the black and white land to the black and white cave, and inside the black and white cave is the black and white dragon. You must slay the black and white dragon and bring me his black and white head." "Sire," says the black and white knight, "it shall be done." So he leaves the black and white throne room, goes out and gets on his black and white horse, goes across the black and white drawbridge, across the black and white land, finds the black and white cave, gets off his black and white horse, pulls out his black and white sword, goes into the black and white cave, and battles the black and white dragon. He's battling away, and eventually he scores that final hit that kills the black and white dragon. Black and white blood everywhere. He cuts off the black and white dragon's head, puts it in his black and white satchel, sheathes his black and white sword, goes back outside the black and white cave, gets on his black and white horse, travels across the black and white land, across the black and white drawbridge, gets off his black and white horse, and he gets into the black and white throne room. He says, "Sire," taking out the black and white dragon's head, "your task has been done. May I now have your beautiful black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage?" Says the black and white king. "The task you have done is but a noble one, black and white knight, but still I feel not worthy of my beautiful black and white daughter. You must travel across the black and white land and find the black and white swamp monster, which can be found through the black and white forest in the black and white swamp. Once you have done this, then I think maybe you can have my beautiful black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage." "Sire," says the black and white knight, "thy task will be done." So the black and white knight leaves the black and white throne room, gets back on his black and white horse, goes across the black and white drawbridge, goes through the black and white forest, going in and out through all the trees, finds the black and white swamp. He finds the black and white swamp monster, and he battles the black and white swamp monster again, hacking away, and he finally kills the black and white swamp monster. So he sheathes his black and white sword, gets back on his black and white horse, travels back through the black and white forest, then across the black and white land, over the black and white drawbridge, gets off his black and white horse, goes into the black and white throne room, and goes, "Sire, your task has been done. May I now have your beautiful black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage?" And the king looks at him and goes, "Black and white knight, thy task has been noble, but still, I don't feel what you have done has been enough to win my black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage. I have one more task for you." "Sire," says the black and white knight, "it shall be done." "Very good. Black and White Knight, what you must do is go back across the Black and White land to the Black and White Mountains. You must scale the Black and White Mountains until you get to the top, at which point there is a Black and White ice cave, and inside the Black and White ice cave there is a Black and White goblin. He is a black and white ice goblin with many powers of freezing things. Funny that. So you must go and kill this black and white goblin. Sire, it shall be done. So he leaves the black and white throne room, gets on his black and white horse, goes across the black and white drawbridge, across the black and white land, finds the black and white mountains, scales the black and white mountains. He feels like he's been doing this for what must be days, and finally gets to the top. Exhausted, he looks around and he sees the black and white ice cave. He unsheathes his sword and he pulls himself up. He enters the black and white cave, and he enters another black and white battle and slays the black and white goblin. He comes back down the black and white mountain, across the black and white land, over the black and white drawbridge, and enters the black and white throne room. Sire, I apologize for forgetting to get off my horse, but I am exhausted. Black and White Knight gets off his horse and walks towards the king. Sire, may I now have your beautiful black and white daughter's hand in black and white marriage? And the king stares proudly at the black and white knight and says, no. Look at his face.
Bye. Okay, folks, from next show I might be going solo.
I get so much pleasure out of telling that one. As Alan says, that story has some grey areas. Yes, talk about the anti-joke of the century. I think I first told that at a Reading festival many years ago. Everybody was awfully wasted, but it was that sort of one where people just sat there and they stared, and then they realised that there was no punchline, which obviously caused them to experience a punchline from the fact that there was a complete absence of one. And it just, the laughter erupted around, and a lot of hate. Lots of things were thrown at me, and rightly so.
I was going to say, was the punchline a bunch of people lined up to punch you?
But yes, do you know what? I hadn't thought about that joke in years as well, and it was just because of the Mary's Room and the whole black and white thing. I was just like, oh my god, I've got to tell the story of the black and white knights. And now you're wishing I hadn't.
We're never going to get viewers again, are we?
I promise that's the only time I've wasted everybody's time to that level.
Yeah, usually it's me wasting everybody's time.
At least Martin seemed to enjoy it. Right. Was there anything else that we had to discuss tonight, or are we pretty much done and wrapped up for the next stream?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much done and wrapped up. Hopefully people will have enjoyed it and maybe thought of something new, or, looked at things in a different way.
Yeah, and of course, any questions, you can contact us either in the comments on YouTube, comments on Twitch. You can find us in our Facebook group, Answers in Reason. You can find us on the Facebook page, Answers in Reason. The website, answersinreason.com. Feel free to ask questions anywhere. We're happy to do it. If you've got any objections or anything like that, please feel free to do it. Please share the video as well and subscribe to the channel wherever you are, wherever you're viewing. In fact, subscribe everywhere. We'd love it if you did that. But yeah, the more important thing to us is actually any interaction that you have. If you want to come on the show with us and discuss a few things, any objections or anything like that, or provide a different perspective, we are more than up for that sort of thing. We may learn something, you may learn something. That's what this is all about. I think any day where I don't actually learn something new is a day wasted. So please come and join us.
And I'm thinking soon to follow on this stream, we should do one on P-Zombies and Zimbos.
Yeah, definitely. I'm well up for that. Other things that we've got coming up as well. As Alan mentioned earlier, we're planning on doing a little morality show. Now, obviously, season 2 of Fresh Air was basically completely on ethics and morality and various moral theories and all that sort of information. And we've done a lot on a lot of articles as well on the topic. But sometimes having this sort of environment might be a little bit more conducive. So what I would like to do is go through my morality cards, as I mentioned earlier, and also have a few people on with us to provide objections as they come up, and any things of, oh, what about. There are going to be common objections within the morality cards as well, but yeah, hopefully that'll be fruitful. One other thing that we are planning on doing is, I know, Dave, you're not necessarily interested in this one yourself, but we're planning on doing a Dungeons and Dragons called Answers in Dragons, or AIDS. That I've never played Dungeons and Dragons before, but we figured, especially seeing as lockdown is on, we may as well take up the time. The wife is planning on joining us for it too, so that could be interesting. She is going to be fully clothed this time, Dave, so
That's why I'm not joining you.
Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else. Do you have any final messages, Dave?
Nope, that's all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody who has been watching, everybody who will be watching, and everybody who has interacted. No, we're not really going with AIDS Martain. Blimey. But it is Answers in Dragons, so that's sort of what it spells. As I said, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. It's been awesome. It's been nice to actually discuss something a little bit different to the norm as well, and hopefully in the future we'll have some more thought experiments, and as Dave said, we'll be doing the P-Zombies, etc. in the future too. Thank you everybody.
Cheers. Good night.
Good night all.